In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg lived under the shadow of this cathedral and the heavy religious anxiety it represented. It was here that a woman named Frau Truffea stepped onto a narrow cobblestone street and began to dance. Not out of joy, but with a violent, convulsive energy that looked like it was happening to her, rather than being done by her. This was a terrifying loss of bodily control. Within a month, the movement had spread to hundreds of people. They danced until their feet were bleeding, until they suffered heart attacks, or until they collapsed from exhaustion. Dozens died in the streets, unable to stop their own limbs. The Strasbourg City Council attempted a civic intervention. Believing the victims simply needed to dance the curse out, they built a wooden stage in the horse market and hired professional musicians. But the music only fueled the contagion, drawing more people into the rhythm. When investigators looked for a cause, they found nothing. No virus, no bacteria, and no physical toxin appeared in the records to explain why the death toll continued to mount. This leaves us with a central mystery. What kind of invisible contagion possesses the power to simultaneously hijack the voluntary nervous systems of hundreds of people at once? One common theory points to this: ergot, a fungus growing on rye. It causes hallucinations and convulsions. But ergotism makes the body rigid. It paralyzes. It doesn't produce sustained, organized movement, and it can't explain the spread among people not sharing the same food. In 1518, the people of Strasbourg were living through a period of extreme environmental stress. Harvests had failed, and grain prices were at record highs. At the same time, the city was being ravaged by the arrival of syphilis, a disease they didn't understand and viewed as a physical manifestation of divine wrath. Their spiritual world was also fracturing. Just 1 year earlier, Martin Luther had published these theses, challenging the Catholic establishment. The very ground beneath their belief system was shifting, leaving the population in a state of constant apocalyptic anxiety. These people were trapped in a psychological pressure cooker. With their bodies weakened by hunger and their minds pushed to the edge by terror, they finally reached a collective breaking point. This is mass psychogenic illness. When pushed past its limit by stress, the brain forces the body to manifest involuntary physical symptoms. But it doesn't choose at random. It follows a cultural script, a learned template for how the body behaves when trauma becomes unbearable. In 1518, that script was Saint Vitus. He was the patron saint of dancers, but also believed to be the source of a curse. They grew up hearing that if they angered the divine, Saint Vitus would reach into their bodies and force them to dance. This wasn't a fringe superstition. It was a mainstream religious fact. They lived with the constant fear that their own bodies could be turned against them as a form of holy punishment. This belief created the path for transmission. When one person began to dance, the shared terror in the community was activated. Seeing the symptom in someone else became the cause of the symptom in yourself. The shared belief acted like a pathogen. Abstract fear mutated into a violent physical contagion that moved through the city like a plague. After weeks of failure, the city council pivoted. They stopped treating the problem as a physical one. They banned the music and began carting the afflicted dancers 40 kilometers away to the shrine of Saint Vitus. At the shrine, the treatment was purely symbolic. Priests performed exorcisms, said prayers, and gave the victims red shoes, a color associated with the saint. And it worked. Over the weeks, the dancing subsided. By September, the epidemic was gone. Because the illness was generated by a symbolic belief, the mind required a symbolic ritual to believe the burden was lifted. The exorcism wasn't a medical cure, but it was a psychological release. The effectiveness of this ritual suggests that the dancers were navigating the architecture of their own cultural narrative. When the story changed to allow for forgiveness, their bodies were finally allowed to stop. These scripts didn't disappear with the medieval world. In the fall of 2011, in a high school in upstate New York, a cheerleader woke up from a nap and found she couldn't stop twitching. Within weeks, 18 more students at the same school developed severe involuntary tics and muscle spasms. Environmental testers checked for toxins and biological agents, just as they had centuries before. They found nothing. The diagnosis from the Department of Health was the same: mass psychogenic illness. The pattern remains: a tightly connected social network under intense, unexpressed psychological pressure, adopting a new script to suit a new century. They weren't reacting to a saint, but to the social anxieties of a modern high school. The scripts evolve from medieval curses to modern tics, but our biology remains the same. When our minds are crushed by culture and lack the words to speak, our bodies will always find a way to dance.